ideas that might match what's coming at us that's unpredictable in this virtual space that's characterized by the exchange of thought, so that we don't have to die by making the wrong decisions when we're actually forced to act. And I would say we can make that a biological claim, because the prefrontal cortex, which is the home of abstract thought, grew out of the motor cortex, and its purpose is to run simulations of the world and simulations of potential action patterns in the world before you implement them, so that you can weed out the deadly ones and not implement them. And so we actually evolved an entire part of our brain, which we use socially, to kill bad ideas before they kill us. And so then if you interfere with free speech, you don't get to do that. And free speech is associated with free markets in this crucial way that you described, because it is very difficult to know what's going to be valuable next as things change. And the way we do that is we subject that computation to a massive cognitive instrument, which is the free market. Hundreds of millions of people are making decisions all the time, right on the edge of change. And if we know the price of something, we're as caught up with the future as we can possibly be. And so if we interfere with that at our great peril, because that is the cognitive mechanism that keeps us updated.
I would simply add to that, and then I will hand it over to Gail, is that free speech and free markets are learning mechanisms. When you say something which is stupid, somebody else can say, well, that actually doesn't work. And if you are smart, you're going to internalize that comment, and you are never going to express that view again. You are going to internalize the truth. And the market is a learning mechanism as well, provided that it's free, so that it can indicate what works and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm. And it's free so it can vary.
Right. So I think that, making this connection between free speech and the market is it's this idea that wealth is fundamentally knowledge. It's the growth in knowledge that distinguishes us from the Stone Age. It's entirely due to the growth of knowledge. And this is a point that one of our friends, George Gilder, makes. He says, wealth is knowledge, growth is learning, and money is time. And from those three propositions, we can derive this theorem that you can measure the growth of knowledge with time. So it's really, how do we grow knowledge?
Well, there's also a definition of knowledge that's rooted in there to some degree, because you might say, well, if you can do the same amount in half the time, you're now twice as smart. You have twice as much knowledge. That's like a definition, right? Because the knowledge, you'd have to define knowledge as useful in relationship to something, which might be the production of something of value. And so if you could do that twice as fast or with half as many resources, especially time, well, then your knowledge is doubled. That's by definition in some real sense.
Right. So we define abundance is this measurement of time prices as they relate to you must be adding more knowledge, either making the money prices lower, or you're increasing income, or doing the combination of both, because it takes you less and less time to earn the money to buy that thing. And it's a consequence of this growth in knowledge. And that growth in knowledge, it comes from all over the place. It's not just researchers in a lab. It's just not professors. It's everybody on the planet is contributing these little bits and pieces of knowledge all the time.
Well, look, you can tell. I always find it a miracle to go to Home Depot, especially the tool aisles. You walk down a tool aisle and there's like 5,000 kinds of fasteners. And you think, well, what does that mean? It means that somebody, generally male, has found some little problem when he was hanging up pictures on a wall or trying to get a bolt off of a particularly recalcitrant piece of machinery, or some little practical problem, and then spent untold hours figuring out how that could just be made better. And then you just have shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves and rows and rows and rows of that. And like I learned, because I've done a lot of house renovations and that sort of thing, I learned that if a construction job is difficult, that means you didn't find the right tool, because someone out there has figured out how to do that. Well, you can certainly see that obviously with computer software as well. So it is miraculous that this is the case.
That's another definition of what a market is. The market is a place where you go to find people that can solve your problem better than you can solve it.
Right. Okay, so let's walk through your book a little bit in more detail, shall we? The first chapter. So part one is Thanos' deadly idea from antiquity to the present and beyond. And so that's this idea of this intrinsic limit of growth and the fundamental pathology of human population. And so we've kind of dispensed with that fairly effectively. Are we in the midst of progress or are we facing the apocalypse? Well, probably both, but certainly we're in the midst of progress. And we've covered Thanos' intellectual and practical progenitors and Julian Simon and the bet that made him famous. And then in part two, measuring abundance, new methodology, empirical evidence, and in-depth analysis. And so let's go over the Simon Abundance Framework because you've both done specific work on that. And is there anything that we started to cover it? Have we covered it enough, or are there more things you want people to know about it?
Marion, you want to talk?
I think I'll leave that to to Gail. Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So we go back to this idea of time prices. Let's convert everything to a time price. And what that allows us to do, in addition, is we can apply a time price to any product, any place, at any time. So I can go back to France in 1800 and figure out what the time price was for a loaf of bread. And I can compare it to the time price of an orange in New York City or Toronto today. So once we've created these time prices for everything, then let's see what they're doing over time. And that's the empirical. So we've got this framework, this analytical framework that says use these, convert things to time prices, and then look at the change in time price over time. And that will tell you what's happening to individuals, what's happening in their life in terms of their personal resource abundance. And that is just this measurement of, well, it cost you this much time yesterday, it cost you this much time today. Your abundance is increasing by that ratio. It's the percentage change in that ratio. If it once again drops by 75%, it means I get 4 for the price of 1. My personal abundance is increasing by 300%. So take the framework, go and apply it to all of these commodities, finished goods, bicycles, drills, and see what's happened to these time prices. And
yeah, so let me ask you about that. These commodities that you've looked at. So let's first of all define that. So we're assuming that people acquire and work for things they both need and want. And we're going to not take a stance of a priori judgment about that. We're going to assume there's all sorts of things that people need and want, and that there's no externally reliable way of determining what those should be. And so we'll let people make those decisions themselves. And people will vary and be similar in some ways in relationship to those